You're Napoleon Bonaparte. It's the morning of June 18th, 1815, near a small Belgian village called Waterloo. You have 73,000 men and the finest artillery in Europe. Across the valley, the Duke of Wellington, dug in, waiting for Prussian reinforcements you intend to make sure never arrive. You've already crowned yourself emperor once, conquered half the continent, escaped an island exile and marched back into Paris to cheering crowds. Lose today, and it isn't just the battle that's over. It's the legend. So you open with a diversion, hit Wellington's right flank at a walled farmhouse called Hougoumont, and pull his reserves out of position. It should take an hour, maybe two. Instead, it becomes the fight that eats your entire day because of one gate and the thing standing behind it. Not a farmhouse garrison, not a company of guards, a 30-ton war machine that has no business existing for another 160 years. Hold that thought, because the men you're about to burn on this one farm may decide whether history remembers you as an emperor or a footnote. This is one Bradley fighting vehicle at Waterloo, 1815. Rewind to dawn. Napoleon has already lost an empire once. Exiled to Elba, he escaped, landed in France, and marched on Paris without firing a shot. The army sent to arrest him joined him instead. This campaign, the 100 Days, is his last chance to keep the throne he just took back. Across the field waits Wellington, commanding a coalition scraped together from half of Europe: British, Dutch, Belgian, German. Less than a third of it actually British, and even less of that strictly English. Somewhere to the east, Prussian Field Marshal Blücher is marching to join him. Napoleon's entire plan depends on smashing Wellington before that happens. On Wellington's right flank sits a walled farm, orchard, garden, a stone chateau, a barn, and one narrow gate facing north. Inside, a few hundred Coldstream and Nassau troops dug into 2 centuries of solid stone. Napoleon hands the opening attack to his own younger brother Jerome, commanding a division under General Ray. The order is simple: pin the flank, draw off Wellington's reserves, nothing more. A sideshow before the real battle begins. Jerome wants nothing more than to prove he's not just the family's spare crown, which is exactly the kind of motive that turns a 1-hour diversion into an all-day funeral. At 11:30, the French guns open up, and Jerome's infantry goes forward into the woods around the farm. And this is the exact moment reality quietly breaks. Because someone got to that farm hours before dawn, and nobody in either army knows it. In the barn, under loose hay and a canvas tarp, sits a machine that shouldn't exist yet. A Bradley fighting vehicle, 30 tons of steel tucked inside a building built for cows. Its orders came down the same way everyone else's did that morning: hold this farm, whatever it takes. Nobody told the crew who Napoleon was going to send. It's about to find out. Here's the thing about a Bradley. It wasn't built to guard a farmhouse. It was built to fight tanks. Up front sits a 25mm chain gun that can put out a burst faster than a man can blink. One good burst from that cannon does the work of an entire volley from a line of muskets, and it never has to stop and reload by hand. Behind the gun, a pair of anti-tank missiles wait in their launcher, built to punch through armor thicker than any wall on this farm. The hull is layered steel and composite plate, rated to shrug off things that would gut a stagecoach. Musket balls hitting that armor don't even leave a mark worth mentioning. Inside sit 3 crew, a driver, a gunner, and a vehicle commander running the radio net, none of them older than 30. Their orders are absurd on paper. Hold one gate against however many men Napoleon decides to spend. And here's the part that matters more than the armor. The ammunition this machine carries is the only ammunition it will ever have. No supply truck is coming. No depot exists yet. Whatever's loaded is the whole war. So here's the question. Before the first shot even fires, Napoleon just committed his own brother's division to what he thinks is a 1-hour diversion. Does that machine turn Hougoumont into a trap that burns Napoleon's entire day? Or does the sheer weight of numbers eventually grind it down? Drop your answer. Then watch what actually happens to that farm. French light infantry, voltigeurs, the best skirmishers Napoleon has, push into the woods south of the chateau. They expect Nassau riflemen and guardsmen behind the trees. Reasonable men who'll trade shots and eventually fall back. What answers them instead is a single sustained burst that clears an entire tree line in about 4 seconds. It isn't gunfire the way anyone in 1815 understands gunfire. It's a straight, unbroken tearing sound, like canvas ripped by something enormous. 30 men go down before the rest even register that the shooting has started. The survivors don't advance. They don't retreat either. They just stop in the open, trying to understand a sound with no place in their world. Word runs back to Jerome faster than any messenger could carry it, because half his advance guard simply never comes back. Jerome assumes it's a hidden battery of guns, something conventional, something explainable, and orders his artillery to soften the position before the next push. French howitzers open up on the chateau and orchard, shells arcing in over the walls. Behind that armor, the crew barely reacts. Shrapnel on steel plate is just weather. This is where the historical Jerome Bonaparte becomes, without question, the most interesting character in this entire story, because his orders were to feint, draw off reserves, nothing more. And instead, Napoleon's own brother becomes personally, furiously obsessed with taking one farmhouse that was never supposed to matter. He commits a second brigade, then a third. Every failed assault becomes a reason to send more men, not fewer. It's the classic trap of an ego with an army attached to it. And this time, the trap has a machine guarding the gate. The gunner starts calling French formations by size instead of number because there are simply too many waves to count individually anymore. Around 1 in the afternoon, a French officer named Sous-Lieutenant Legros, a giant of a man the soldiers call the Smasher, grabs an axe and leads a charge straight at the north gate. He swings that axe into the timber himself, again and again, while men die on either side of him, and he simply does not stop. The gate splinters. Legros and roughly 30 French soldiers pour through into the courtyard. For one terrible moment, the farm's defenders are fighting hand-to-hand inside their own walls, and the whole position hangs by a thread. This is the real story, the one that happened with or without any machine in a barn, and it deserves to be told straight. Lieutenant Colonel James MacDonald, a Highland officer built like a door, gathers every man he can reach and throws his own shoulder against that gate. Musket butts, boots, bare hands. They force the gate shut inch by inch while Legros' men are still inside. Every Frenchman trapped in that courtyard dies where he stands. Except one drummer boy, the guardsmen can't bring themselves to kill. Wellington will say years later that the whole battle turned on the closing of that gate. He isn't exaggerating. And notice what didn't save it. Not the machine, not the future. Just men who refused to let go of a piece of wood. The gate is shut, and every guardsman in that courtyard is already calling it the turning point of the whole day. None of them know the machine that helped hold it is about to have the worst 10 minutes of its existence. Somewhere in the smoke, the gunner finally gets a clean line on the howitzer battery, feeding all this, and spends one of the 2 missiles doing what nothing else on this field could do in one shot. One gun crew and its cannon simply stop existing. Furious and down a howitzer, Jerome orders every gun he has left to switch targets entirely. Stop wasting shells on the walls, start putting them straight through the chateau roof. Within minutes, the old timber and thatch catch fire, and flames start climbing through the building where the wounded are sheltered. This actually happened. The chateau at Hougoumont really did burn that afternoon, with wounded men trapped inside it. Now add the machine to that fire because a burning barn roof is not something even 30 tons of steel can simply ignore. Flaming debris drops onto the Bradley's deck, and smoke pours into the crew compartment through every hatch seal that isn't perfectly sealed. The gunner sight goes dark, choked with smoke, and for a few minutes, the crew is fighting a fire with one hand and a war with the other. Outside, another wave of French infantry sees the smoke and reads it exactly the way you'd expect, as weakness, as an opening, as the moment the defense finally breaks. They come in at a dead run, screaming, certain this is the wave that finally takes the farm. Inside, half blind, the gunner fires by instinct and memory instead of sight, walking rounds along the wall by feel. It isn't precise, it isn't clean. For the first time all day, this is a fair fight, and everyone inside that hall knows it. A written order comes down from Wellington himself. Hold the farm regardless, and let the wounded burn if it comes to that, because losing this flank loses the field. It's the coldest, most necessary order of the entire battle, and it has nothing to do with the machine in the barn. By mid-afternoon, Jerome has poured somewhere around 12,000 men into a fight meant to occupy a fraction of that number. The smoke clears just enough for the gunner to see again, and what he sees is nearly Jerome's entire division, formed up for one final push. There's no clever trick left, no ammunition to spare for anything but pointing the gun and firing until one side stops standing. The chain gun opens up and simply does not stop, burning through everything the vehicle has left in one continuous grinding burst. Whole companies come apart in the open ground between the trees and the walls. MacDonald's men, still holding that gate with muskets and bayonets, add their own fire into the gaps the machine leaves behind. It's the ugliest kind of victory. Not clever, not surgical, just an unbroken wall of fire that nothing on foot can walk through. Jerome himself is nearly hit leading the final rally, his coat torn by a round that misses him by inches. And then, all at once, the French division breaks. Not falls back in good order, breaks. The way men run when courage simply runs out. The last French soldier retreats out of range, and Hougoumont, impossibly, is still standing. Here's the part worth sitting with, and it isn't about tactics. Napoleon doesn't know it yet, but he's just burned 12,000 men in his best hours of daylight on a farm he was never supposed to need. If you were that crew, half blind in smoke with the wounded burning above you, do you keep grinding down his army here, or break out through the gate and go hunt Napoleon himself? Tell me your answer. Then watch what the rest of this day actually costs him. While Hougoumont burns and bleeds, the actual Battle of Waterloo is happening less than a mile away, and it does not wait for Jerome. Marshal Ney leads wave after wave of French cavalry against Wellington's center, certain the line is about to break. It doesn't. The infantry forms square, muskets bristling in every direction, and the cavalry breaks against them like water against a reef. Ney keeps sending horses at a wall of bayonets, like the 10th charge is somehow going to work better than the first 9. Farther along the line, a second farmhouse, La Haye-Sainte, finally falls when its German defenders run out of ammunition to defend it with. For a moment, Napoleon's center actually has a real chance to break through, but the reserves that could have exploited that gap are a mile away, dead or dying in an orchard, fighting a war Napoleon was never supposed to have to fight. Late in the afternoon, exactly on schedule and exactly as Napoleon feared, Blücher's Prussians arrive on his exposed right flank. He has almost nothing left to meet them with, because almost everything he had is still tied up at one stubborn gate. In the version of this day that actually happened, Napoleon still had a reserve to throw at Wellington's center in one last desperate gamble, the Imperial Guard. In this version, that gamble happens too late, with too little, because the Guard's own supporting divisions bled out at Hougoumont hours earlier. The Guard advances anyway, because Napoleon has nothing else to send. Wellington's line holds, then answers, and for the first time in history, someone shouts the words that end an empire. La Garde recule! The Guard is retreating. Once those words spread, the entire French army doesn't retreat. It dissolves. In the history you learned, Napoleon escapes the field, rides for Paris, and abdicates 4 days later. He tries to flee to America, gets blocked by British ships, and surrenders instead, walking onto a Royal Navy warship like a man choosing his own exile. He spends his last 6 years on a rock in the middle of the Atlantic, writing his memoirs, shaping his own legend from a prison with a view. That exile is where the myth gets built, the romantic prisoner, the tragic genius, the man too dangerous to leave in Europe, too magnetic to just execute. That myth outlives him by a century, inspiring a nephew who crowns himself emperor, and a political movement that borrows his name for decades after he's dead. None of that happens this time, because with his reserves gone and his center collapsing at the exact moment the Guard breaks, Napoleon isn't riding clear of the field. He's caught in the middle of it. Coalition cavalry sweep the chaos of the retreat, and somewhere in that flood of running men, Napoleon Bonaparte is taken, not exiled. There is no island, no memoirs, no decades of legend quietly growing on a rock in the Atlantic. Just a general in a torn coat, marched off a battlefield he lost faster and more completely than he ever should have. History doesn't get a romantic ending for him. It just gets an ending. Back at the farm, the fires are out, the gate is still shut, and the machine that held it is nearly empty. There's no supply line here, no fuel depot, no factory that will build another one of these for over 160 years. The crew does what every crew in this position eventually has to do. They strip everything useful, and in the dark, quietly bury what they can't carry beneath the orchard floor. Whatever can't be buried, they burn, until there's nothing left that could ever be explained to anyone in this century. Then 3 soldiers in strange uniforms walk out through a shattered gate and disappear into a Belgium that won't build their vehicle until sometime in the 1980s. Nobody at the farm that night can say for certain what held that gate, only that something did. 2 centuries later, restoration work at Hougoumont Farm, now a preserved memorial, turns up something that historians can't place. Beneath the old orchard floor, a survey team finds a layer of soil that shouldn't hold what it holds. Corroded brass casings, dozens of them, machined to a tolerance no 1815 foundry could ever have managed. One steel fragment, twisted and scorched, stamped with a partial marking, 25 millimeters M-//LOT. The alloy tests as unmistakably modern. The soil layer above it has been undisturbed since the year of the battle. Both facts check out. Neither one makes any sense. The find is quietly logged, quietly boxed, and quietly removed from the public exhibit within the week. It's the kind of find that ends careers instead of starting them. But one of the historians on that survey writes a single line in a private notebook that never makes it into any official report. Something held this gate the day the Guard broke. It wasn't one of Wellington's men, and it wasn't one of Napoleon's either. It fought with weapons we wouldn't build for another 160 years, and then it buried itself here so history would only ever have to explain the men. One farmhouse, one gate, one machine that was never supposed to be there, and an emperor who lost not just a battle, but the legend he would have spent the rest of his life building. So tell me, did that gate save Wellington's flank, or did it quietly cost Napoleon the only decent ending he had left? Drop your answer below. And next time, a single F-22 Raptor patrols the sky above Agincourt, 1415. English longbows against the finest knights in France. Subscribe, because history is about to get rewritten again.